Sometimes a discovery rewrites the entire history of humanity. The year was 1901. The rough waves of the Aegean Sea were crashing against the steep cliffs of the island of Antikythera. Captain Dimitrios Kondos, waiting for the storm to calm, ordered his diver to descend. Elias Stadiatis put on his heavy copper diving helmet and began sinking into the depths of the sea. Stadiatis surfaced in panic and said only one thing: "There are dead people on the seafloor." But what the diver had seen was not corpses. Lying on the seabed were massive bronze and marble statues from the Roman era. They had discovered one of the greatest shipwrecks of the ancient world. The storm had stopped, but what lay beneath the sea was about to start a new storm in history. Hundreds of priceless artifacts were recovered from the wreck, but one of them attracted no attention at all. This green metal object, about the size of a shoebox, sat forgotten on a museum shelf for years. In 1902, archaeologist Valerios Stias noticed something while examining the metal block. A small bronze gear was protruding from the rust, and at that moment, one of the most disturbing questions in history was born. How could a person who lived before Christ have produced a technology resembling a modern clock? The most valuable thing carried by the sunken ship was not gold or silver. It was that metallic mechanism whose name nobody even knew. For years, researchers were hesitant even to touch the object, because the historical thesis accepted at the time was this: the ancient Greeks were brilliant philosophers and magnificent sculptors, but they did not possess the technology to build complex machines. And this small, rusty block threatened that entire narrative. Over time, the metal block began to break apart. Dozens of bronze gears emerged from inside. But there was a problem. The device had been severely damaged. It was impossible to understand which direction the gears turned or what exactly they calculated. Researchers were like people who could see the inside of a clock but had no idea what the clock itself was. Some gears were only a few millimeters in diameter. This was not the work of an ordinary craftsman, but of an extraordinary engineer. But who was this person? And why had the rest of history never mentioned this machine? No one could understand what the device did until the end of the 20th century. Technology had finally advanced enough to solve the mystery. Scientists placed the object inside high-resolution X-ray scanners. What appeared in the scan images was more complex than anyone could have imagined. This was not a fragment of a statue or a decorative object. This thing was the first analog computer in history. And this machine had been built roughly 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years before the computer age. When you turned a handle on the device, more than 30 bronze gears inside began to rotate at the same time. The gears were precisely arranged to calculate the positions of the sun, the moon, and the planets in the sky. But that was only the beginning. The machine could even calculate the irregularity of the moon's orbit, its elliptical motion. It could predict on which day and at what hour lunar eclipses would occur. It could even estimate the color of the eclipse. Even more astonishing, the device also functioned as a calendar. It had a special dial that showed when the Olympic Games would begin. With this machine, an astronomer could calculate the past and future of the sky. They could observe the positions of the stars. The ancestor of modern computers had been buried at the bottom of the sea in the cargo hold of a ship 2,000 years ago. We thought the computer age began in the 1940s, but it turns out it had already begun and ended in the blue waters of the Aegean long before the birth of Christ. And here is the most disturbing part of the story. The gear technology used inside the Antikythera Mechanism was extremely advanced. Humanity would not reach a similar level of mechanical complexity again until the 14th century. Even the massive tower clocks of the Middle Ages could barely match the complexity of this hand-sized device. If this mechanism dates to around 150 BC, why does no trace of this technology remain just 100 years later? Why do we not see anything like it during the height of the Roman Empire or at the dawn of the Renaissance? For historians, this discovery was like finding a smartphone in a Victorian grave. It showed that history does not progress in the straight line we once imagined. Sometimes a civilization reaches a peak, achieves the impossible, and then that knowledge disappears overnight. Such a machine could not have appeared out of nowhere. Behind it must have been a lost tradition of engineering. And then that knowledge vanished. Humanity forgot, as if it had never existed. So who built this impossible device? Where do the fingerprints lead us? When the inscriptions on the device were examined, some clues emerged. The calendar system used points toward Corinthian colonies, especially toward the city of Syracuse in Sicily. Syracuse was the city of one of history's greatest geniuses, Archimedes. According to legend, Archimedes had built bronze spheres that imitated the movements of the planets. Perhaps this mechanism was a continuation of a design that emerged from the school of Archimedes. And such a machine could not have been a single example. If these devices existed at the time, why was there not one on every ship? Why did ancient writers not enthusiastically describe these miraculous computers? One theory suggests that these machines were unimaginably valuable. That is why only kings and the wealthiest astronomers possessed them. Knowledge was monopolized by a very small elite. One day, that small group died, or their cities burned in war. And with them, the technology was buried in the darkness of history. Perhaps today we are looking at the only surviving fragment of an ancient smartphone. Who knows how many more Antikythera mechanisms lie hidden in the dark waters of the Mediterranean? How many forgotten geniuses lie beneath the sands together with their inventions? The Antikythera mechanism reminds us of a disturbing truth. Progress is not guaranteed. A civilization can unlock the secrets of the sky, calculate the movement of planets, predict future eclipses, and then one day, that knowledge disappears. A ship sinks, a city burns, a generation dies, and humanity's most advanced knowledge is buried at the bottom of the sea. Then humanity spends another 1,000 years rediscovering what it once already knew. Perhaps the Antikythera mechanism is not the first lost technology. It is simply the first one we have managed to find.